Welcome back, everybody, to the Shock Absorber podcast, and I'm here excited to record another one. And I'm here excited to record another one with my two favourite guests, not guests, co-hosts. Tim, how are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Excellent. I'm glad you put that jacket on because we were in the same jumper before.
Oh, yes. Yeah, this will be different. Those same as last week, so it'll be confusing.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, I was wearing the puffy jacket.
Oh, dear.
Yeah.
Well, it's not confusing because Stu's on the lounge with you.
That is true.
Yeah.
We've got Stu back.
Welcome, Stu. How are you?
I'm good, thanks.
Going well. I like the, what do you call the shuckers?
Shuckers,
Yeah, very cool.
shuckers.
Very nice. We're going to talk today about communications, and in particular, our strategy of communications. We did theology 2 weeks ago. We had a, what do we call that, an interlude episode?
An interlude, that's a nice word.
We just talked about what we liked, what we're interested in, me and Tim. Yeah, we're back talking about the strategy of communications. But before we get into that, Tim, we mentioned last week, you finished the podcast with Andy Crouch and Jay Kim on artificial intelligence.
Yeah, you set that up as if this was my idea. This was actually your find.
Because I didn't finish it this week. That's the problem.
Well, I listened to it this morning as I was going for a run.
Nice.
And
that's just a bit of a humble
brag,
brag, isn't it?
I was just doing my lazy 10K. No, I wasn't actually. There was nowhere near that.
How far did you get?
Oh, it was just under 5.
It didn't happen unless it's on Strava.
I don't use Strava, no.
Oh,
no.
Well, it's fair to say it didn't happen.
Yeah, I'm not particularly social with my. I don't like running with friends. So I just want to do my own thing.
You just need to record that you've run this far and then push the notification so everyone knows. Oh,
well, it's all about communication.
Exercise.
I don't think I need to communicate my. Anyway, we've now talked about me communicating my running day. Andy Crouch and Jay Kim had a very good discussion about technology. Particularly entering into AI space, thinking about what is digital technologies and AI in particular doing to us as a society, as humanity. How is it forming or deforming us? And then drawing some implications for pastoral care. So how do we pastor people who are using AI in different ways? And it may be forming or deforming them. And then also they sort of finished the discussion the last few minutes by talking about how do you use it in ministry. So for those who are in ministry, what would be a wise and appropriate use of AI in terms of, should you use it to help you write sermons or do tasks or do pastoral care, or like what are the appropriate uses? They talked a little bit about that. So yeah, it was quite good. Yeah, so I'd highly recommend it. I need to go back and re-listen to it again. I think you were saying that last week you had listened to the first half and realised you kind of need to be taking notes.
Yes.
There's a lot in there.
There is a lot in there.
Yeah, I was not taking notes. But
you were running.
I was running. They do helpfully on the YouTube video in the show notes have a discussion guide. So that would be a good way to go through it slowly and use it as a conversation starter.
I can put that in the show notes. But so you used AI a fair bit in your writing for your PhD. What have you learnt in using that in good ways and bad ways?
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing is developing. I find it interesting to help me get a few references. Sometimes it suggests references that aren't real. So you've always got to check everything it does. But I also ask it questions like, if I don't know something about a particular thing, I say, what is this? And then it tells me, and most of the time it's pretty right.
It's a bit like Wikipedia, I find. In that.
Okay, is it? Yeah.
Well, I mean, Wikipedia, I remember I was second year uni when Wikipedia first was starting to make roads, and all the lecturers were like, oh, don't use that. You never know who's writing it. It's open sourced and blah, blah, blah.
That's often where your research starts, though.
Well, and I think that's just bouncing and affirming what she's saying is that I kind of find the same thing, like Wikipedia article, but sometimes it's just like, actually, I don't know too much about this author and his thoughts on, so fill in the gaps for me, and it's really helpful.
Yeah, that's good. There's also some AI coming out that is designed for research, but when I've tried to use those, they're all fairly rudimentary and new, and often don't have theological aspect. So I'm still wondering if I'm wasting time as well as saving time, because I'm spending a lot of time trying to learn how to use this particular program, and then it might not actually do anything And then I go, oh, that's serious. And then I'm like, which one should I use? Should I use that or that? So then I'm sort of stuck for choice. So yeah, it's like any new thing, but it's pretty fun. I think it's amazing what it can do, actually.
I watched a video of someone talking about how you should use AI in your life or something like that. And he's saying, find the one that's interesting and then stick with that one because of the learning capabilities of it. But then I'm like, but then you're like locking yourself in to one thing and you're giving it all the information. I don't know how to think about that either. But because you've used Grok, which I haven't used at all. That's the X one. I haven't used that. Is that
that's
any
the
different?
funnest one?
Is
Yeah, I think Chat's just developed a voice recognition thing, but Chat talks to you now, I think. But Grok was the first one I did so I had to drive over to Ryde to do a sermon. So I had 45 minutes. So I thought, I'll have a bit of fun with this AI. So I turned on the voice assistant and said, hello, Grok. And it's like, hello, what can I do to help you today? I said, I'm thinking about my PhD. How very interesting. What is your PhD in? I said, it's in youth ministry as a cultural shock absorber. Well, isn't that a brand new topic that no one else has thought of? You must be an amazing person. So I was like, wow, I'm feeling pretty good about myself as I drive past Macca's, drinking my coffee. And anyway, but what was interesting was I said, well, I'm just about to start a literature review on new social movement theory. What can you tell me about new social movement theory? And it's, well, I'm glad you asked. And then it rattled off all this stuff, and I'm pretty familiar with it. I'm like, okay. They took the big three thinkers. I said, what are the main themes from each of those thinkers? And then it gave me the themes, and they were the right themes. And then I said, what's the problem with new social movement theory? And then it told me. And then I said, so what's the state of new social movement theory today? And it says, well, micro new social movement theory was developed in 2000 by XYZ, and it critiqued new social movement theory as being too broad, and it was really good. And I'm like, wow. At the end of it, I said, can you just give me an outline of what we've talked about? And then it just put out all the authors and all the themes. And then I thought I'd have a bit more time because I had 3 more traffic lights. So I thought, I might say, so how does new social movement theory apply to soul revival? And then it said, well, it looked on the internet and said, well, soul revival is this and this. And then I gave it some more information, and it was able to talk about how soul revival was a new social movement. But actually, micro new social movement was actually a better definition of soul revival than new social movement. And then I said, if I was to now employ third place theory from Oldenburg to describe soul revival too, how would that add to my understanding of soul revival and bring new themes to bear to expand what new social movement theory was able to achieve? And it did. It went bang, and it gave me all these things. And then it was talking about, well, the Relo Bash and the space for the Relo Bash, and but that would have created needed organic leadership models that would have challenged the elite models of the established. Oh, it was terrific. So I had a really fun conversation with this machine, but it was all about the PhD. So I didn't actually then write anything out of that. It was just a fun convo. But yeah, that's what I think might be a bit of a future of it. And one last thing, we went to Bree Warrener for a funeral, Jai and I and Brad this week. So we had 10 hours in the car, and we were talking about the strategic framework for our world mission team. And so I said to Grok, hey, Grok, there's Brad, Jai and me in the car. We'd like to talk to you about developing a strategic framework for a world mission that ties in local, regional and world mission. And it got it wrong sometimes. It was really funny and clunky, but it actually wrote a strategy document for us as we all 3 of us inputted into this thing. So I'm like, wow, next thing I'm going to do is put a computer, the AI Grok in the middle of the table and have a meeting with someone about the ministry area we're talking about and ask Grok to write out a strategic paper out as a result of the conversation. So that's some fun stuff I've been doing with Grok.
Why did you say Grok's fun? It's just because it's a little bit more silly?
Well,
because I've seen Elon use it on Joe Rogan, for example, and they tried to get it to write a joke, for example.
Yeah. The other funny part was it's got a cranky person, so you can ask it, and it goes, "Why would I help you, you idiot?" And then it tells you. That's what I mean by fun. I think it's also a bit rude too. Like it gets a bit, because Elon's into this free speech thing, and I think his Grok thing even created a Nazi AI agent or something that they had to shut down at like X that, or something. So exactly. I think it went too far. Yeah. I don't know. I'm really interested if it helps me. If it doesn't, I'm not that worried about it. At the moment, that's how I'm taking it.
All right. It's interesting.
It's fun though.
Well, again, one of the reasons we're talking about this is because, first of all, communications is includes a lot of digital stuff, then it's obviously going to include AI. And we have used it in some of our communications ministry, especially for clipping up some of our videos. But what I was going to ask you, Stu, to kick off on this is you mentioned third place theory. That's also extended into third space theory, though. So third place theory is a big part of our strategy as a church. It's how we like to have, talk about regulars and irregulars, and the regulars set the culture for the rest of the community. How do you think we can look at the strategy of our communications looking at like third space and third place? Because it can be a little bit of a confusing thing, because third space talks about really going to physical proximity of other people. The first place, if people don't know, is your home and family life. Second place is work or school or study, where you study. And third is where you have your community and hang out with people, really. And we've obviously tried to take the core tenets of that and apply it to how we have it do it as a church as well, to have that as a community. But how would we do that? I think a lot of people would ask you, how do we do that online or in our communications?
Yeah, I mean, the brief answer is that the third place theorists, when the internet was invented, started wondering about online community. From the very beginning, the big idea was it's never going to be as good as face-to-face. However, people do relate to each other online, and what sort of communities do they develop? And I don't know if I'm going to get his name right, but there's a third space theorist called Homi Badada, and he's a post-colonialist theorist, so he's not a sociologist like me. He's into post-colonial theory. But he argues that third space theory, and again, he came up with that in the 90s in response to the internet, but it's less physical and more cultural and discussive. And like third places that are meant to be defined mainly by conversation as a main activity, he kind of went into this idea that our main activity online is conversation. And so he kind of looked at how there's possibilities for new negotiations, there's possibilities for new cultural forms, but there's also part of that destabilizes fixed identities as well. So you do get a lot of voices that are able to come into the spaces. So that's a good thing. So it's more democratic in a way, the democratization of the discourse by having more voices, from particularly minority voices, being able to speak into a context where in the past it was mainly majority voices. So his post-colonial view was like, particularly in a country like Australia, most of the voices we'd see on TV in the 70s and 80s were white faces. But with the internet, there's opportunity for people who are part of migrant communities to have more conversation and express their opinions. Also, there's feminists online that are thinking like that too. It gives women an opportunity to speak into contexts that they might not have had before, etc. However, the other problem with it is it destabilizes identities as well. So the identities we form with one another, the meaning we gather that bring identity and bring subculture, are not the same as face-to-face. So one really easy example that I'll just use one example for time is we can lie easier online. So we can create an identity that actually isn't us.
Less accountability, like we talked about.
So there's less accountability, yeah. But face-to-face, I'm not the gorgeous Instagram influencer that I appear to be on my Instagram feed.
Aren't you?
As I ride on my horse in Texas looking regal.
I'll get that. I'll find that photo.
An Australian Englishman in Texas instead of an Englishman in New York, to quote this Sting song. What was that? The Police song, was it? Englishman. Anyway, I went down a rabbit hole there. So yeah, I think there's the negative is that we actually also don't create the kind of relationship we can face to face. So the physical nuances that we can only pick up when we see someone's face, even videos don't pick up what we have been able to develop towards becoming as human beings. We pick up body language, apparently even scent, which I'm not aware of most of the time, but apparently, other species pick up scent more than we do, but apparently we even pick up scents as well. So obviously you can't smell things on the internet. You can't, you can pretend to be happy when you might not be. That's the third place part of it. So yeah, there are communities online. We take them seriously. We should speak into that. We'll have an opportunity to be a part of that, but it's not going to replace physical. That's my main point.
Well, that was something that, Tim, you mentioned this just before we were recording, that Crouch and Kim were talking about, was that having the question is why and how is incarnate relationships better than what AI could produce? And it comes down to it sometimes, or we have seen examples now of people forming relationships with AIs because there's the perfect friendship or the perfect partner, but it doesn't really encompass the full kind of humanity aspect of what we are and what we've made to be, right? Is that where they were going with that?
Yeah, so there's a few different threads that kind of come out of that. So one is that actually from a creational point of view, it's not a mistake that God has made us to be incarnate physical beings. Like our humanity matters. And so we've just been preaching through the Apostles' Creed. We've referenced that before. And we've kind of slowed down, as the Creed does, over Jesus' birth and death and now resurrection this week. And I think in all three, you see that it's not a mistake or it's not accidental that Jesus is fully human in each of those things, in his birth, in his death, and then also in his resurrection. And so there's an honouring of humanity. There's an honouring of fleshliness that comes out of that. And so when we're using these technologies to have disincarnate, non-human relationships, even with each other, the text messaging, emailing, the phone calls, where we're disembodied, we're not together, then those things are not giving us the full extent of what we could do. And one of the interesting things that Andy Crouch points out is he says that we often talk about technologies as, isn't it amazing the reach that we can have with technologies? And he says, well, actually, it's interesting that Paul was almost apologetic for using technology in these letter writing. And it's almost like, I really actually wish that I could be in person with you. And this is a poor second. I'm sorry that I can only address you in this way. So you get that in a few different letters. And Andy used that to talk about the way in which we want technology to help foster incarnate relationships, not be a replacement for. So that was one of the things that they talked about. They use this analogy, and I think he may have said he got it from Robert Putnam, who wrote the classic book Bowling Alone, which very much like Ray Oldenburg is all about the fracturing of society and the loss of relationships through growth of suburbia and technology and all sorts of things. But he talks about the difference between an element and an alloy. So iron is an element and it is relatively strong, and you can make things, you can make cast iron plates and these kinds of things, and it's good. But you combine that with just a little bit of carbon, the right amount, and you get steel. And steel is actually stronger and a better substance than iron was, and it's far stronger than carbon is. And so by having 80-20, 80% iron and just 20% carbon, you end up with an alloy that is really, really strong. And so they then use that as an example of if we had 80% incarnate relationship and just 20% digital of texting each other during the week, or maybe making a phone call, maybe listening to someone on a podcast or watching some YouTube video, but actually the majority, 80%-ish of your time was in incarnate relationships, then at that point you've probably got digital technologies that are, like we talked about last week, Joel, the additive rather than extractive. The problem is when you go past that, and 80-20 is not a set rule, but you get the point that when we overuse digital technology, and when we're more in third spaces than we are in third places, when we're not actually incarnate with people, we're not living into who God has created us to be. So there's some of that formational stuff. And so when it comes to, as we think about a strategy for communication, how do we create the right kind of communication for people that helps with that 20%? There might be a couple of weeks a year when you can't make church. And so isn't it great that we have a communications that allows us to listen to a podcast or watch the Facebook feed or watch the YouTube video for those times we don't. But if we had people who who could otherwise come to our church but choose not to because, it's all right, I can just watch it on Facebook. It's kind of like, actually that's not fulfilling our strategy. We've actually not helped them live into the relationships and community that we really want them to have. But again, this is the conversation we had during COVID time, and you'll probably talk about this in a sec. But coming into now is that there are times and places and there are particular people and situations where it has been a big boost. And we know for our Miranda congregation, we have a number of significantly elderly and infirm members who it's logistically incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to actually be incarnate with us in person. And yet Miranda has been their home for so long. They know the people. And when they watch the live stream in Miranda, there is a glimpse of them being there in that reality. And then we partner that up with pastoral visits, and people go and visit them and drop off food and those kinds of things as well. So yeah, there's that mixture there. And I quite like that sort of that idea of an alloy is mixing things together to build strength. So that was a couple of things that came out of that that feed into the conversation.
Yeah, I think that's good because I think it relates to the way that I'm trying to think about how we're doing the rest of this podcast series is that here at Sorovo, I am the pastor that oversees our communications team. This podcast, for example, and our other podcast, Chip Lunch, is one of those ministries. But a lot of how we do it now came out of what we did during COVID. And I was going to say it'd be cool if we did like a little bit of a discussion around how do the strategic elements of our church, how do they play out in our digital space or our communication space? Because I'd see this ministry or our communication service team as quite a fledgling ministry. It's not something that's been done for a long time during church in various different guises. This is new. Even the podcasts we've done, they're just new. Like we've never really seen that happen before until like this, what would it be like 2010s is really when it started. So my kind of question to you guys is to help me, which is if this is this fledgling ministry, but we want to keep it really still aligned with our strategy, how do we do that? Because I think the great example of that is what we did during COVID, where we switched up. The first COVID lockdown we did, streamed all 6 gatherings that we had. And then from week away, which got cancelled, we're like, let's do it online. We did like this podcast style format for 4 days. I think it was 4 or 5 days. And then we said, well, let's see if we can do that for our gatherings going forward. And we created something different again. So the ability for us to change a lot is really great. We can just delete a video if we have to, or we can do something completely different. But my question, I suppose, to you, and Stu, I'd love to hear what you think first, is how do you think we can start using our strategy again as we move forward? We've talked about AI turning into this behemoth thing already. That would be part of it. But what are your thinking in terms of our strategy is the same across all our service teams? But
what I really loved about what you said, Tim, was that 80-20 rule that they were talking about is in line with our desire to not just assume that relationships are going to take place, that we have church on the weekend and we then teach about being God's people and being a family. And yeah, we have a few events around. We have things like, churches generally have things like Bible studies and men's events and women's events and different things like that, which are designed to get people together, youth groups and kids ministries, stuff like that. But to actually have a group of people who are doing what Paul talks about in Romans 12, where he says, be devoted to one another in brotherly love. It's pretty hard to be devoted to one another over a cup of tea in 15 minutes after church where you're just catching up all the time. So how do we go beyond catch up? And so we've put a lot of thought into just not assuming that other churches aren't relational, but seeking to be more proactive, I suppose, in being relational. And so using that third place theory to create a space where people can slow down a little bit and sit down. Actually sitting down is really important. So for us, lounges are quite symbolic of who we are as a church, because a lounge invites you to sit down with someone for a good conversation that might last a while, rather than standing around a coffee machine just for a little while. So when you take that and you look at third spaces, or you look at digital technology, I think in some ways we're looking for ways that technology will enhance the relationships people have with each other rather than replace the physical relationships that people will have with each other. And I think that's a pretty simple, not rule, but I suppose line in my mind, just to continue to think, does this new technology, AI, give me an opportunity to help people to grow in their relationship with Jesus and grow in their relationship with each other? And it's going to be distracting. Like Crouch says, every technology has negative associations, negative sides to it. And the danger is that it actually might replace physical relationships because people are already maybe a bit anxious. They aren't really super keen to go in a big group of people. There may be, as we found in COVID, people realising they could go to church online maybe is what some people were doing with televangelists back in as early as the 60s and 70s, where they think, well, I'm just going to go and hear a message and hear some songs and some prayers. I could do that sitting in my lounge room without having to talk to anybody. But I think the challenge of AI particularly is, my guess is it's going to try and draw us into a relationship with itself. Everything else has. You know, the radio tries to draw you into a commitment to listening to the radio even while you're at work. They program things so that workers will listen to the radio, the TV, the internet. Social media is the best example of it, that people spend hours and hours trying to manipulate people to stay scrolling. They're trying to have you committed to them. So I'm a little bit worried about how something with even more power is going to be even more manipulative and draw people away from physical relationships. So as I look at AI, I think, how does it facilitate and help? Well, if it means that I can send an email faster, I might use it, because that'll give me more time with other people, more time with Jesus, more time praying, more time reading my Bible. But the downside is, I think there are people who used to say they were too busy to pray before they had social media, but they've found time to have social media in their life and to get into doom scrolling. So, yeah, that's the side of it that it concerns me. It could draw us away from time with God and time with each other rather than facilitating that. So, yeah, the question is, creatively, can we use it creatively to help people to re-engage with each other and with God?
I think one of my favourite ways of like kind of answering what you're saying is the Chip Lunch podcast, where we get people from
that's a great
amongst
example.
our church, and they come and share their story about how God's worked through their lives. So we can, with the tagline we've got for that is stories of Jesus changing everything, which I love. But one of my favourite bits of feedback around it is that they hear a podcast of someone from a different gathering that they go to, and they go, "Oh, I've heard your Chip Lunch," and they know that person a little bit already.
That's a great example.
And so they can have a conversation and get to know each other better. That's that relational element that I think
that's
we're
where it's
talking
at.
about.
Yeah, that's where it's at.
Even Crouch and Kim, I remember they were talking about how people can see AI as a superpower, as a god, but that's not how God relates to us. So if we pray to God, I think we even said this last week, if we pray to God, he doesn't give us a 4-page or a 3-paragraph download of all the information and what's going to happen like AI does. He answers a prayer in a different way, and it sometimes doesn't answer in the way that we want it to. Whereas AI, for example, will just tell us, that's a great idea. Like, it always says that.
Hey, that's a super interesting thing. I never thought about that. Like, God does say no. God disagrees with us. AI never disagrees
never
with us.
does. It's like, oh, great idea.
And it lies
yes,
to us.
great.
God is a truth teller, but AI will actually make it up if it has to answer the question.
So, and I think that's that relational element they're talking about, right, Tim? Did you? Sorry.
Oh, absolutely. No, I was thinking another podcast that I've found really valuable is, I've mentioned these guys before, the Think Biblically podcast with Sean McDowell and Scott Ray. They were talking about a number of different things and talked about how AI is sycophantic. As in, like, it will always, this idea that it's always building you up. And part of that is the programming. And I can't remember which conversation I was listening to that said, they could program it otherwise. They could program it to
like
pull you down.
Cranky grok.
Yeah, cranky grok.
You should get on the cranky grok. It's quite entertaining. That's why I think it was refreshing.
Well, I think
cranky
it was
Australian.
Wasn't there a restaurant near us? Something about Karen's or something. Like, you could go in and everyone was grumpy with you.
Yes.
And the waiters are going to like swear at you and have a go at you and just be really rude. And people were paying for the experience of getting really rude waiters and thought it was hilarious. Yeah, you could format an AI to do that. But yeah, the difference is that God is personal. He's not an artificial intelligence. He's not a large language model that you ask him questions and he's going to give you some sort of, middle of the road answer based on all of the responses he's given to everyone else. Like, he relates to us as a person. And so, we need to approach people that way, we need to approach God that way. And I think this was the other comment about when we have relationships with AI entities and AI people or those kinds of things, they are perfect in a way and affirm us in a way that other people don't. And part of the problem of formation is, particularly if young people are learning to relate to others through AI companions.
That's a really interesting point.
They'll then go out into the real world and find that other people hurt them sometimes. Other people are not always as responsive, are not always building them up. And that itself will become a self-reinforcing loop of just driving you, well, I might as well just go and hang out with Grok then, because Grok always has time for me. Grok never puts me aside and leaves me to go and do something else. Grok never loses its temper at me. Grok never goes quiet and, whatever. So, but real people do. And so they're actually forming us to have real person relationships. And this is the thing when it comes to communication. If all of our spiritual formation is from podcasts, well, we can keep picking and choosing the podcasts we listen to. We can keep switching on and off this and, just flick on this week and go, oh, Tim's preaching, I'll give it a miss, and then turn back on later and go, oh, Stu's preaching this week, okay, I'm going to sit down and watch this one. Whereas if you actually turn up to church and you've got the actual real life embodied experience of the imperfection of each other. And so that imperfection of each other, the frustration of living with amongst another. There was another podcast, completely different topic that I was listening to this week that had this phrase, the gift of the given other, which is when we go to church, we're given other people. And for better or for worse, these are the people that God has given me to hang out with. And that will actually form us more in love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. There is no self-control. There is no patience needed when I'm talking to Grok, because Grok is instantaneous. It's always giving me the answer I need right now. It's always affirming. It never tells me that I've done the wrong thing. And so I'm not being formed in Christ-likeness if that is the majority of my time. Even when it comes to research, I've been finding a lot of this stuff really helpful for, as I said, research and ideas, but actually there's some sort of formation that happens by just having to sit in the library and flick through books over books and go, no, that one didn't. I've spent half an hour reading that book and there was nothing in there that was helpful. Okay, what's the next one? And so those kinds of things are also formational. And so what part of formation are we giving up? Now, on the other side, yes, when we had to wash our laundry in a bucket with a scrubbing, what do you call the
washboard?
The washboard. When you got the old washboard, and that was learning us patience, that was learning resilience. So we don't necessarily go back to that and get rid of our washing machine. So again, it's always a balance with this technology, but there does seem to be something particularly transformative about our digital moment that may be more of a step, and so you'd have to be just more aware of.
Stu, so do you think that our strategy of communications, a good way to think about it is to reflect the realities of our relationship with God and with others, but it's in an online space? Do you think that would be one way to think about it?
If I've understood what you're saying, I think acting Christianly is really good to approach both the physical relationships and the digital world. I think that when I look at it too, I think, I don't know what you two think about this, but I don't think we need to engage with the digital world. I think when Facebook first came out, it was almost like everyone went online, and then after a little while, everyone was starting to discuss big ideas, and then all of a sudden everyone was feeling like they needed to comment on everybody's thoughts, and these big arguments were developing around Christians in the public space, and what's the role of being a Christian when the world's changing, and Are we in a new Babylon? Should Christians just retreat to monasteries or stay? And everyone felt, including myself, felt like we needed to contribute to that conversation. But then one day I just went, I don't think I have to contribute to that conversation. And it was almost like I was at a cafe at a table where people were having a really interesting conversation, but I decided I just wanted to go home and I didn't have to stay there. And for some reason there was this draw that I felt like I needed to be a part of it. And then somewhere along the line I just went, I don't think I have to. So I don't know what you two think about that, but I think that freedom to not be a part of it could be helpful to people who develop quite a lot of anxiety around their version of whatever they feel like they have to be a part of, particularly young people why do you have to put a photo of yourself up on the internet? Or why do you even have to look at other people's lives? You don't have to. If they want to put a photo of what they ate for lunch, and you look at it and go, oh, I couldn't afford that, or that dress that person just bought is a lot nicer than my dress, or that person's got a better life than me because they just went on that holiday. I started thinking, there's a lot of comparison, and there's a lot of coveting that goes on in the digital space, that where we wish we were better or wish we were like other people. And I think, just being Christian in all the spaces might give us a bit of freedom not to fall into turning the 20% into a 80%, flipping it over. So I think some people do that.
You got any thoughts on that too, in terms of, do you think Tim, I should say, the strategy should reflect the realities of our relationship with God and with other people?
Yeah, and I think that as we think about it, how do we communicate well as a church? What are we creating? And we're going to think carefully about, is it going to be content for the sake of content? Is it going to be content for the sake of reach? We could be a lot more controversial and get further reach if we wanted to.
I could get a lot more controversial.
You could get a lot more controversial. Yeah, we've heard you when the microphones are off. No,
it's true. But you're not joking.
Joel McMaster.
Like, there are,
especially when he does a wedding speech. Have you ever heard one of his wedding speeches?
Yeah, or emceeing. That's
spicy.
You got to pay for the highest level Patreon to get that content. But again, we've talked about this. We talked about this 2 weeks ago when we talked about the Sydney Sweeney stuff, that there are content creators who are pushing for reach. That's their goal. Their goal is reach. Their goal is notoriety. Their goal is
power, Stu said.
Power, that's right. And sometimes, I see Christians online playing this game all the time. I've got to play into the latest controversy, like Stu said. I've got to join into, all the Christians are playing this game, or they're talking about this topic. And so, I got told really early on, the way to play Twitter is to jump on the latest controversy, use the hashtags, and that's how you get noticed. And pretty early, I'm like, I couldn't care less about that. But there are ways of playing the game. But again, even with good motives, I want the best reach so that I can have the most communication out there, so I can help communicate the gospel as best as possible. But again, I think we just need to be careful. If our strategy is formation, if our strategy is about how do we help the saints of soul revival grow in their love, knowledge and obedience to King Jesus, then we're going to use our communications as a service to that end. And part of the way that we want to grow the people of soul revival is to be missional. So there will be things that we use in our communications that will be outward facing. And at that point, reach is one of the factors that we're going to be thinking about. How can we communicate effectively? We're also going to be thinking about, okay, if we're, the reality is we're communicating to teenagers in our youth ministry, many of whom have their minds, their attention, their language shaped by what they see online. And so we're not necessarily going to become TikTokers for the sake of reaching the TikTokers, but there is going to be an awareness of how do I communicate effectively to this generation of teenagers who are right in front of me. And some of that is just going to be an awareness of, well, there are particular memes, there are particular, and I mean that broadly in terms of there are particular ways that they're used to hearing communication, communicating themselves, that we will think critically about, okay, well, what's the best way for me, therefore, in an Incarnate youth group, when I'm communicating to them, helping to communicate the gospel in a way that is most relevant to them. I'm thinking about this at the moment because I've been asked to do the talks on youth camp. And so I'm thinking, okay, well, how do I communicate best to teenagers in a way that is helpful, that is a way that is engaging, so that the gospel of Jesus can be made really clear to them as we sit incarnate all together on youth camp together. So, we're using technology and communications as a tool to equip the saints for their discipleship, for our corporate discipleship, and for our mission outward. And all of that fits within our strategy of what we're trying to do with Soul Revival.
Yeah, I think that's good. We're running out of time, Stu. Is there anything else you want to contribute before we wrap up this and then another thoughtful discussion?
Just one last thing. I'm a chaplain for Cronulla Sharks, and I was invited to the Wellbeing Conference for the NRL, which is the National Rugby League, which is a professional sport in Australia. And all the clubs, all their wellbeing teams all came together for this conference, and the chaplains all got to go too. So I'm a chaplain for the club, so of Cronulla Sharks. So I went as the chaplain, and I'm part of the wellbeing team at the Sharks. Don't get paid, but I'm just a volunteer. But one of the speakers there was an ex-player who found ice baths while he was playing so helpful for recovery, but also as a helpful way of centering himself. And he was trying to work out why do I find it quite centering to jump in an ice bath? And to start off with, I was a bit skeptical. I was thinking it sounded a bit hippie, but I was just like listening along politely. But the more he talked, it was really interesting because he said he still takes an ice bath now, but he takes it in the morning every day before he starts the day, because he says to himself, if I can have an ice bath, there won't be anything else today that'll be worse than that. And if I can punch through that, then all the other challenges that come at me, I'll go, oh, okay, that's not as bad as an ice bath. And I really liked that. And then I kept listening, and he said he's got a business around this ice bath thing. But the reason he's so into it is, he said, they go into schools and teach kids about ice baths and stuff, which sounded really funny. And I thought that was kind of funny and fun and stuff. But then when he said it, I actually thought, yeah, I get it. Because he said, our big thing we say to kids is, it's good to be uncomfortable. So an ice bath is actually deliberately putting yourself into something that it's not going to be fun, that you don't like. You're all giggly about it to start off with, and you're silly about it, but then you jump in and then it's shocking to your system and it's cold. But then you get out and you feel kind of good. Oh, I went through that. That was good for me.
It's a big part of why I do cold showers.
There you go. You do cold showers. So he said, it's kind of like, it teaches me that bad things are good, because the rest of society is teaching me to be comfortable all the time. But if you're always comfortable, that's not good for you. So he's teaching, but the kids think that uncomfortable things aren't good for them, and they try and avoid it at all costs. So he's trying to teach kids not to avoid uncomfortable things, because sometimes they're really good for you. And I just thought that was really brilliant. And the thing with digital things in the digital space is it's often comfort driven, and it's very convenient, and it gives you instant feedback. Yeah. I mean, once upon a time, someone would write a letter and then they'd wait for a month until they got the letter back, and then they'd write another letter, and then they'd write another letter. But now we're like, if someone doesn't answer our text straight away, or our tweet or whatever, we're just like, come on, where is it? So I think there's something about trying not to be completely... We are going to be changed by technology increasingly, but this AI revolution is going to be bigger than the Industrial Revolution. I think it's going to change the workplace, it's going to change the family, and unfortunately it's going to change us. So just like we industrialise our relationships now, and we pay people to do things that once upon a time our families would have done for us, as good as it is to have, midwives and doctors and stuff at the birthing process, there's something very special about, a woman having all the women of the village being there with her as she brings a new life into the world. That's pretty special. So there are things that Crouch says we lose when technology comes along. You get a freeway that can drive from one city to another, but you can't ride a horse along that route ever again. And we don't look at what we lose. And I'd love us to enter into this AI revolution with a strategy that comes from the Bible, thinking, let's try not lose as much as we can. We are going to lose things as we gain things with this AI. It's going to change us, but what can we guard for the gospel and for ourselves? And because we're human, let's not... I'm really worried that we're actually going to have a blurred line between technology and humanity, and it's going to get us to question the actual what is a human. I think there's going to be AI rights, there's going to be people are going to marry AI, there's going to be all this kind of stuff that's going to go on. And in the midst of it, AI is something we've created, but we've been created by a creator God in his image. And we've tried to create this AI in our image, but the likelihood is it'll become independent of us and actually critique us and actually challenge us and rebel against us, just like we rebel against the creator. But we are not the creator and we can't redeem it. So we're creating something that could become even more powerful than us that we can't redeem if it goes off track. So I think we should be cautious as well as optimistic.
That's great. Thank you. Appreciate the discussion, guys. Been great.
Thank you, Joel.
Thank you very much. And that's our strategy for communications. Next week we'll talk about practice. But for that, we'll leave it as is. We'll say thank you to everyone listening and watching, and really appreciate your time with us. You can email me, joel@shockersorbit.com.au, if you've got anything else you would like to contribute, or drop a comment on our YouTube channel. We're putting out some clips AI found for us. We've got to edit them, but the AI is finding them for us. So you might see them come up in your YouTube feed as well. But for now, thank you, Tim and Stu, and everyone listening. And we're finished with a one way.
One way.